Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're building the essential toolkit that psychologists use to understand, well, the most complex and fascinating thing in the entire universe, the human mind.
Let's just start with the core problem, right? How do you scientifically measure a feeling? Or how in the world do you observe a private thought? Unlike studying, say, a rock or a planet, the mind is totally invisible. It's private, it's always changing. So where did scientists even begin to try and figure it out?
Well, to start, the very first psychologists tried the most direct, the most intuitive approach you could possibly imagine. They simply looked inward.
This is the original method, introspection, and it works on a really simple idea. You are the world's #1 expert on your own mind. So if we want to know what's going on in there, the idea was, hey, let's just ask you to report on it. Simple as that.
But here's the fundamental trade-off of introspection. On the one hand, yeah, it's the only way to directly get at someone's private, personal feelings. But its greatest strength is also its biggest, most fatal flaw. It is completely subjective. My description of what sadness feels like could be totally different from yours, and there's just no objective way to check. And that subjectivity is exactly why later psychologists, the behaviorists, basically threw it out, calling it unscientific.
Okay, so to solve that problem of subjectivity, the next tool in our kit shifted the focus completely. We went from what people say they feel to what people actually do.
And what's cool about observation is how flexible it is. You can be a participant observer, right in the middle of the action, kind of like a referee on the field. Or you could be a non-participant, just watching from a distance like a coach on the sidelines. The setting can be totally naturalistic, think watching kids on a playground, or it can be highly structured, like a teacher in a classroom using a specific checklist.
But there is a huge problem, and this quote nails it. People just act differently when they know they're being watched. It's human nature. If you know a psychologist is taking notes on you, you might act more polite or more focused or just weird. So the very act of observing can actually change the behavior you're trying to study. So, how do we get around that?
All right, to get around the problems of both subjectivity and observation, psychology developed its power tool, the experiment. This method is all about taking control so you can find some real definitive answers.
And this whole shift to experimentation, it basically has a birthday, 1879. This is the year Wilhelm Wundt established the world's very first psychology laboratory in Germany. This is the moment psychology officially put on a lab coat and became a true modern science.
The real magic of the experiment comes down to two words: controlled conditions. So, unlike watching kids run wild on a playground, in a lab, the psychologist controls as many things as possible. And they do this for one specific reason: to prove that one thing causes another thing to happen.
And the process is actually pretty straightforward. You change just one thing. That's the independent variable, the cause. Let's say it's the amount of caffeine someone drinks. Then you measure what happens to another thing. That's the dependent variable, the effect, like how well they do on a memory test. And crucially, you keep all the other stuff, the controlled variables, exactly the same for everyone. Things like the time of day or how hard the test is. That's how you can say with confidence, aha, the caffeine is what affected their memory.
Okay, so now that we've got our main tools in the kit, let's look at a couple of specialized instruments that are designed for very, very specific jobs.
These two methods are really all about a choice you have to make. Do you want to go for depth or do you want to go for breadth? If you need to go incredibly deep on one single, unique case, like, say, the mind of a criminal, you use a case study. But if you need to go incredibly wide and survey thousands of people about their opinions, then you use a questionnaire.
But you guessed it, each one has a major weakness. All those deep insights you get from a single case study, well, they might not apply to anyone else in the world. It's a sample size of one. And with a questionnaire, well, you're relying on thousands of people to answer honestly. And let's be real, that's not always a safe bet.
So we've built our toolkit, but the real skill of a great psychologist isn't just having these tools. It's knowing exactly which one to pull out for which job. And here it is, our complete toolkit, all laid out. And you can see each method is really specialized. You would never use a questionnaire to try and prove cause and effect. That is a job for an experiment. And you wouldn't run an experiment to try and understand someone's private inner world. That really requires introspection. It is always, always about picking the right tool for the job.
And that right there is the most important lesson. The true power of psychology isn't about finding one single perfect method that works for everything. It's about having this diverse set of tools in the toolkit, which lets researchers attack a question from a bunch of different angles all at once.
So really, the big takeaway here isn't just a list of methods to memorize. It's a whole new way of thinking. The next time you read a headline about some new discovery in human behavior, you can stop and ask, wait, how do they know that? Did they just ask people? Did they observe them in the wild? Or did they run a tightly controlled experiment? You now have the toolkit to start answering that for yourself.